Your body aches. Your head is pounding. You feel hot, then cold, then hot again. Your throat is raw. Even lifting your arms feels like a small negotiation with your own muscles. You don't know exactly what's wrong. You just know something inside you has turned against you. For most of human history, this moment had no hospital waiting room, no pharmacy, no doctor's office down the street. So what did ancient humans actually do when they got sick? For roughly 99% of the time humans have existed, sickness was handled with nothing but plants, fire, and each other. That sounds primitive. It wasn't. In 1957, an archaeologist named Ralph Solecki began excavating a cave in northern Iraq called Shanidar. Inside, he found the remains of a Neanderthal, a close relative of modern humans who lived across Europe and parts of Asia until roughly 40,000 years ago. This individual, now known as Shanidar I, had a withered right arm, likely amputated below the elbow early in life. He was blind in one eye. He had lost most of his hearing. He also had advanced arthritis that would have made walking genuinely painful. Here's the detail that matters most. None of these injuries killed him quickly. He lived with all of them for years, possibly decades, in an Ice Age landscape full of predators and unforgiving winters. A man with one working arm, partial blindness, and limited hearing survived in that environment for years. How does someone like that stay alive? He didn't do it alone. Somebody fed him when he couldn't hunt. Somebody helped him move when walking hurt. Somebody thing again and again across years to keep him alive. This wasn't an isolated case either. Other Neanderthal skeletons from other sites show the same pattern. Bones that broke and healed crooked. Joints worn from age. Teeth ground down by a life that should have ended far sooner than it did. Sickness, injury, and old age weren't automatic death sentences. They were survivable because the people around you made them survivable. But care alone doesn't cure an infection. So what else did ancient humans actually do? They used plants. Real plants with real chemical effects, chosen long before anyone understood the word chemical. In a cave called El Cidrón in northern Spain, archaeologist Karen Hardy and her team examined something most people would walk straight past. Dental calculus. That's the hardened plaque that builds up on teeth over a lifetime, trapping tiny fragments of whatever a person ate, breathed, or chewed. Hiding inside that ancient plaque on Neanderthal teeth, they found traces of yarrow and chamomile. Both plants are bitter. Neither has meaningful nutritional value. Nobody eats them for taste or calories. But both have been used for thousands of years since as natural pain relievers and stomach soothers. One of the Neanderthals examined had a dental abscess, a painful pocket of infection at the root of a tooth, along with intestinal parasites. In plain terms, he was in pain and sick to his stomach. And the evidence suggests he had been chewing on medicine, not medicine from a lab. Medicine built from careful, repeated trial and error, tested on real bodies, and passed down across generations. Which plant calms a stomach? Which one dulls pain? Which one should never be touched again? This is medicine in its rawest form. No prescription pad, just memory, observation, and the will to survive. It goes further than plants, too. Across dozens of sites in Stone Age Europe, archaeologists have discovered human skulls with neat, deliberate holes cut into them. A surgical procedure called trepanation. This wasn't an accident, and it wasn't violence. The cut marks are too precise, too controlled. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Many of those skulls show new bone growth forming around the edges of the hole. New bone only grows on a living body. That means a meaningful number of these patients didn't die on the operating table. They survived the surgery, healed, and kept alive, sometimes for years afterward. Someone in the Stone Age, with no anesthesia, no antibiotics, and no understanding of germs, performed surgery on a human skull, successfully enough that the patient lived to grow new bone around the wound. One more case makes the pattern impossible to ignore. In 1991, hikers in the Alps discovered the frozen body of a man who had died roughly 5,300 years ago. Scientists named him Otzi. Otzi was carrying a small pouch. Inside it were 2 pieces of fungus, specifically birch polypore, a type of bracket fungus that grows on birch trees and has measurable antibacterial and antiparasitic properties. When researchers examined his remains, they found he was infected with whipworm, a parasite that lives in the intestines and causes exactly the kind of pain those properties are known to ease. He may not have been carrying that fungus by accident. He may have been carrying his own medicine cabinet, 5,000 years before the word medicine existed. 4 different moments, 4 different timelines, climates, and continents. One pattern: wounded, sick, in pain, and in every single case, treated, cared for, kept alive. Now picture what this actually looked like day to day. Imagine you're sick inside a shelter 40,000 years ago. A small fire burns near the entrance. Smoke drifts up and out through a gap in the rock above you. Someone presses a wad of chewed, bitter leaves against your skin or hands you a bitter tea brewed from boiled bark. It tastes terrible. You drink it anyway because the person handing it to you has done this before for someone else, and it helped. You're not isolated behind a closed door. You're a few feet from everyone else in the group. Your coughing, your fever, your pain, all of it is witnessed by people who depend on you and who you depend on. Someone changes their plans because of you. A hunt gets delayed. A task gets reassigned to someone else. The entire rhythm of the group's day bends slightly around your sickness because if it doesn't, you might not make it through the week. There was no privacy in being sick, but there was also no such thing as being sick alone. Here's the twist that should change how you think about all of this. Most people imagine prehistoric life as a brutal contest where only the strongest survived and the weak were left behind. Survival of the fittest in the coldest, most literal sense. But Shanidar wasn't fit. He had one functioning arm, limited hearing, limited sight, and a body in constant pain. By the only the strong survival model, he should have died young, alone, and quickly. He didn't. He lived for years as a person who needed consistent help just to get through an ordinary day. Archaeologist Penny Spickens has argued that this kind of sustained, costly care for the sick and disabled isn't a side effect of human evolution. It may be one of the engines driving it. A species willing to protect its wounded instead of abandoning them builds something a purely physical advantage never could. Trust between individuals, cooperation that outlasts a single hunt, long memory passed down by people who survive past the point of being useful hunters, but are kept around anyway because their knowledge matters more than their strength. In other words, compassion wasn't a luxury that showed up after survival was already secured. Compassion may have been part of the survival strategy itself. Now, think about what happens when you get sick today. You probably don't chew on bitter leaves remembered through 40 generations of trial and error. You take a pill manufactured in a factory you'll never see, prescribed by someone you put for 12 minutes. That's not a criticism. Modern medicine saves lives in ways no Ice Age healer could have imagined, treating infections and injuries that would have been a death sentence even 100 years ago. But something else has quietly changed along the way. Being sick today is often a private event. You isolate in your own room. You message your manager that you won't be in. You scroll alone in bed while the rest of the world keeps moving exactly as it did yesterday, completely unaffected by what's happening to you. Nobody delays a hunt for you. Nobody reroutes their entire day because your body is struggling. Compare that to a Neanderthal with one working arm, kept alive for years by people who had every reasonable excuse to let him go and chose not to over and over again. The medicine has changed almost beyond recognition. The bitter plants have been replaced by chemistry refined in laboratories. The cave shelters have been replaced by hospital wards. But the original ingredient, the decision to notice someone's suffering and respond to it instead of looking away is older than language itself. So the next time your body aches, your head pounds, and you feel hot, then cold, then hot again, remember what that moment actually is. It isn't new. It isn't something modern life invented. It's one of the oldest experiences a human being can have. And for nearly the entire history of our species, the answer to it was never just medicine. It was people choosing not to look away.